After my pack fell, my father and I joined the Black Moon pack. Alpha Victor admired my gift for runes and promised to make me his Luna. I was so full of hope. I didn't even mind that he was using my gift to shield his entire pack. But he kept delaying our marking ceremony, leaving me to endure the pack's scorn for my fallen bloodline. On the eve of my father's death, he even temporarily marked Serafina, the daughter of another Alpha. He claimed it was to secure an alliance. I cried myself dry in the endless wait, only to hold my father as he died in my arms. Victor, however, continued to use my gift, commissioning runes from me only to give them to Serafina. The final straw was when Serafina destroyed my rune sanctum and flaunted the very pendant I'd crafted for my own bonding ceremony. That's when my heart finally shattered. I no longer cared about being his Luna. I simply walked away. But after I left, Victor's desperate plea echoed from the moon goddess altar. Come back and be my Luna. Please. My mate, Alpha Victor, kept putting off our marking ceremony. Then, just before my father died, he temporarily marked a she-wolf from another pack, claiming it was to secure an alliance. Dad, please just hold on. I clutched my father's cold hand, a golden healing light pouring from my palms. The power of my runes burned through his veins, but it couldn't stop his life from fading. Elara, my father's voice was a faint whisper. Your bonding ceremony. It's going to happen, I said through gritted teeth, pushing more power into the healing. Alpha Victor promised me. The light in my father's eyes dimmed. I wanted to see it. The golden glow from my hands grew weaker. My own healing gift sputtered, a silent scream of failure in my soul. I burst out of the healing room, my hands shaking as I activated my communication crystal. You need to get here now, my voice trembled, but the words shot through the crystal like steel. My father is dying. Elara, I understand you're upset. Victor's thoughts came through our link. I could hear Serafina's laughter in the background. But Serafina's elites were ambushed on the border. She needs wards for the territory. My father is dying. I know, Elara. Tomorrow. I swear, we'll have the bonding ceremony tomorrow. Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. You've been promising tomorrow for 3 months, Victor. This time it's different. Her territory was cursed by shadow mages. Only your cleansing runes can purify it. I severed the link. When I returned to the healing room, the pack healer was murmuring the final rites. That night, I sat in the empty room, staring blankly at my communication crystal. Then a new image shimmered to life on the crystal. Serafina, dressed in an evening gown, a pendant hanging from her neck. It was a delicate runestone carved with the protective ward of an alpha's mate, a design I had spent 3 days perfecting. Underneath it, the caption read, "Temporary bond. Expires in 3 days." My hands started to tremble as I stared at the screen. The crystal in my hand lit up. Elara? I can feel the turmoil in your mind. Victor's voice was laced with fake concern. The pendant. The one Serafina is wearing. Silence. It was a condition of the alliance. It doesn't mean anything. It took me 3 days to carve that rune. Your craftsmanship is second to none. You told me it was for our bonding ceremony. A longer silence. Then Serafina's voice in the background. Victor, the portal is waiting. The Alpha Council doesn't like to be kept waiting. Elara, let me explain. No. You listen to me. My voice was ice. My father died today. His last wish was to see me marked. And you were off cleansing her lands. I'll portal over right now. Don't bother. I cut the connection, but a moment later, his thoughts forced their way through our link again. Elara, I had to help Serafina solidify her position. By the time I heard, it was too late. There was no saving him. I'll pay my respects at his grave, I swear it. Fighting back tears, I turned and picked up the emblem that tied me to this pack. It was time to leave. You can't leave the pack. Beta Marcus stared at the pack emblem in my hand like he'd seen a ghost. I can and I am. I placed the emblem on the stone table in the Black Moon War Room. My father's burial is at 3 this afternoon. I just need to clear out my things from the rune sanctum. But you're our head healer, he stammered. Without your protection runes, our warriors. They'll find a replacement. I turned and walked toward my sanctum. In the stone corridors of the pack house, pack members turned to stare, their whispers following me. Knew the alpha would toss her aside eventually. Fallen bloodlines are unstable. Her gift is probably tainted too. Why would he ever choose her over Seraphina? Seraphina is true alpha blood. I heard they never even marked. What a disgrace. I pushed open the door to my sanctum and began to pack my carving tools. Every moon silver stylus was a gift from my father. Every runestone slab held a piece of my soul. Footsteps stopped outside the door. Elara. It was Victor. I didn't turn around. If you're here to talk me out of it, save your breath. I brought you this. A moonstone, glowing with a soft, silvery light, appeared on my work table. It was the highest grade rune amplifier, obtainable only by an alpha. This will triple the power of your runes, he said, his voice pleading. I journeyed to the northern sacred mountain just to get it for you. I picked up the moonstone, feeling the pure, lunar energy within it. Then I gently set it back down. It's too late. Elara, I didn't explain properly last night. Seraphina's temporary bond does expire in 3 days, but it was just a political necessity. His communication crystal flashed. A faint, cloying floral scent, Seraphina's perfume, seemed to drift from the crystal's transmission. I watched him waiting. Victor glanced at the crystal, hesitated for a second, then channeled his energy into it. Not now, Seraphina. What do you mean? Not now. Her voice shot out of the crystal, sharp as silver daggers. My family's elders are inspecting the border territories today. You promised you'd be my escort. I have something more important right now. More important than our blood pact? Victor's eyes darted between me and the crystal. I saw that familiar expression, the hesitation, the weighing of options, the calculation. Give me 10 minutes, he said to the crystal. He cut the link and turned to me. Elara, I have to handle this, but tonight, I'm burying my father, I said, slinging the leather pack full of my rune tools over my shoulder. Alone. As I left the sanctum, I heard familiar laughter from the great hall. Seraphina, dressed in a white cloak, was clinging to Victor's arm, speaking to several pack elders. She saw me, and a triumphant smile touched her lips. Elara. Her voice was sickly sweet. Just in time. I was just telling the elders about my plans for territorial expansion. Care to listen? After all, as a friend of the acting Luna, you should see the new territories under my protection. All eyes fell on me. I felt their pity, their embarrassment, and their smug satisfaction. Victor looked at me, a flicker of conflict in his eyes. He opened his mouth, as if to say something, but Seraphina's hand tightened on his arm, pulling him possessively toward her. Come, my alpha. The elders are waiting. Victor's gaze met mine one last time, his expression a tortured mix of guilt, regret, and helplessness. Then he let Seraphina lead him away, leaving me alone in the middle of the hall. 3 hours later, I stood alone before my father's grave as the moon priest finished the last rites. No Victor. No bonding mark. No father's last wish fulfilled. Just me. And a bag full of rune tools I wasn't sure I'd ever use again. As I turned to leave, my communication crystal flashed. Victor's thoughts came through. Sorry, the council meeting ran late. We'll talk properly tomorrow. I have something to tell you. I stared at the pulsing light of the crystal, remembering the look of conflict in his eyes in the hall. My heart felt like ash. You're back. When I pushed open the door to our cottage, Victor was sitting by the fire. The firelight danced on his face, but it couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes. This isn't my home anymore, I said, dropping my pack by the door. I'm just here to get the rest of my things. Don't say that. He stood holding a piece of parchment. Look at this. I stepped closer. It was an exquisite rune design. 2 crescent moons intertwined, with the ancient symbol for eternal bonding in the center. Our bonding mark, he said, his voice brimming with hope. I had the silver forged by the dwarves and sourced the moon opal myself, just like we planned. I stared at the design. 2 months ago this would have made me ecstatic. Now it just felt like a cruel joke. It's beautiful, I said, my voice flat. Just beautiful? Victor frowned. Elara, this is our future. In 3 days, Serafina's bond expires. Then you'll have another excuse. What's that supposed to mean? I turned toward the bedroom. Nothing. Elara, I understand you're angry, but the bedroom door opened. Serafina emerged from the bedroom wearing nothing but one of Victor's shirts, her blonde hair tousled, her eyes heavy with sleep. What stung most was the faint golden light shimmering on her chest. The calming rune I had personally drawn for Victor. My rune. On her. Again. Oh, Elara. She yawned, stretching shamelessly. You're back. I thought you'd be spending the night at the cemetery. The air froze. I looked from my rune on her skin to Victor. Explain. Her energy is unstable, Victor said, his words rushing out. A side effect of the bond. She needed a calming rune to sleep. On her. You're the best healer, he explained, flustered. In our bed. Serafina giggled. Don't be so possessive, Elara. It's not like you're officially bonded yet. Sharing a rune is no big deal. I looked at the scene before me and felt a strange sense of calm. You're right. I walked to the wardrobe and started grabbing my personal belongings. Since we're not officially bonded, there's no reason for me to stay here. What? Victor looked at me stunned. You're moving out? Of course. I shoved a few tunics into my pack. Serafina needs her calming runes. She needs your care. I'd only be in the way. Elara, you can't. Can't I? I dragged my bag toward the door. Or should I not be a gracious host to your guest? Victor rushed over and grabbed my arm. You can't leave. Why not? Because you're my, he trailed off, the word mate dying on his lips. We hadn't completed the marking. We had no blood pact. We had nothing. Serafina leaned against the doorframe, watching the drama with amusement. Victor, just let her go. It's only for 3 more days. Once our temporary bond is over. Shut up. Victor roared. Then he turned to me, a desperate fire in his eyes. Elara, I swear. Tomorrow. As soon as the bond ends, we'll go to the moon goddess altar. We will complete the marking, and then we will go to your father's grave together, and tell him the good news. I looked at his hand on my arm, the plea in his eyes, the disdain in Serafina's. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, he swore, his grip tightening. On my blood and before the goddess, I swear it. Serafina scoffed behind him. Victor, don't forget you have border patrol tomorrow. Nothing is more important than this, he cut her off, his eyes locked on mine. Elara, trust me one last time. I looked at him, the man I once thought I would spend my life with. As Serafina watched impatiently, he held my hand, his voice low and firm. Tomorrow, we complete the ceremony and go to your father's grave. I swear it. The next morning, I returned to the temple district of the Black Moon Pack to gather my last few things from my rune sanctum. When I pushed open the familiar stone door, I froze. My rune sanctum had been desecrated. The sacred chamber deep within the temple, blessed by the purest moonstone energy, was a ruin. Serafina was sitting at my moon-silver desk, using my own rune stylus to draw something. Failed attempts were scattered across the table, each one a crooked, spiritless mess. Oh, you're here, she said without looking up. Good. Teach me how to draw this rune. I've tried a dozen times and it's still wrong. I looked at the precious moonbark parchment she had ruined. This is my workshop. Is it? She finally looked up, a defiant smirk on her lips. Victor said his acting Luna deserved a workspace befitting her station. I looked around the room. My family's ancient grimoires were shoved into a dusty corner. My personal moonstone amplifier had been moved. Even the protection runes I had personally inscribed on the walls had been crudely painted over by her. You destroyed my runes. Those old things. Serafina scoffed. My bloodline is superior. It's only natural that my runes take precedence. Footsteps sounded outside. A few young pack members were peeking in, whispering amongst themselves. Look, Elara got kicked out of her own sanctum. See? Bloodline is everything. A fallen pack is a fallen pack. She can't even stand up to a temporary mate. How can she be our head healer? I took a deep breath and began to gather my remaining tools. I placed each one into my leather pack with the reverence of a final ritual. That's it. Serafina stood up, her voice laced with disappointment. I thought you'd at least put up a fight. I guess the lowborn really do cower before true nobility. I didn't answer, just kept packing. Say something, she taunted. Or have you finally accepted your place? Realized you're not worthy of the alpha and decided to leave on your own? The murmuring outside grew louder. See? She doesn't dare talk back to Serafina. It's bloodline dominance. She can't fight it. I picked up my last moon silver stylus, the first rune tool my father ever gave me. Elara! Victor's voice boomed from the doorway. He strode into the sanctum, his face turning to thunder when he saw the scene. Serafina, what are you doing? I'm using my workspace, she said, defiant. Didn't you promise me the best? But this is Elara's. I cut him off. Let her have it. Everyone froze. I held my pack of rune tools and looked calmly at Serafina. Congratulations. The room is yours. I hope you can create runes of true value here. Elara, you can't. Victor tried to stop me. I can do whatever I want, I said, walking past him toward the door. After all, I'm just a healer from a fallen bloodline, right? The pack members in the hall parted for me, their mocking expressions now replaced with confusion. They didn't seem to expect me to accept it all so calmly. I reached the temple entrance. I glanced back. Victor stood at the doorway of the sanctum, his fists clenched, radiating pure fury. Then I heard the roar. Enough! The Alpha's command ripped through the temple, a wave of raw power that slammed everything into silence. I turned to see Victor grab Serafina's arm, his eyes blazing with rage. Who the hell do you think you are? His voice was a low, dangerous growl. That stylus was a gift from her father. Those grimoires have been in her family for 300 years. Victor, are you insane? Serafina struggled. She's just a BM. A wave of alpha power slammed Serafina into the stone wall. The temple fell silent. I didn't even flinch. I just turned my back on the chaos and walked away. Too late. It was all too late. I walked out of the temple and headed straight for the nearest portal station. Half an hour later, I was sitting in a portal bound for a coastal city, a one-way ticket in my hand. My communication crystal pulsed with a frantic plea from our mind link. Elara, I ended it. The temporary bond is broken. Meet me at the moon goddess altar at sunrise. I'll prove to you that you are the only one. The crystal pulsed in my bag, a frantic, desperate beat. I didn't need to hear the words. I already knew what he was saying. But as the portal flared to life before me, I silenced the crystal, severing the link for good. And I didn't look back. Elara's POV. Silence had fallen over the coastal city. I stood on the balcony of my small, rented apartment, pulling a silver dagger from the leather satchel at my hip. It was the last thing my father gave me, its hilt carved with the ancient runes of our pack. Moonlight caught the edge of the blade, glinting cold and sharp. I tightened my grip and drew a deep cut across my left palm. Blood welled up instantly, a vibrant crimson in the moonlight. In the name of the moon goddess, by the blood of my ancestors, I, Elara of the Snowfang pack, willingly sever my bond with Victor of the Black Moon pack. The ancient words spilled from my lips, each syllable heavy with finality. The blood in the wound began to glow. The mark of my pack's bloodline. From this moment on, we are nothing to each other. The blade cut again, deeper this time. More painful. Our lives and our deaths are no longer bound. The light from my blood grew brighter. Our souls are now free. A tearing pain ripped through my chest, as if something was being brutally torn out of it. It was our unfinished mate bond, snapping thread by thread. Pain. Excruciating pain. But it was also release. Victor's POV. I stood on the altar of the moon goddess, the annulment scroll clutched in my hand as I waited for Elara. Suddenly, a gut-wrenching pain shot through me. I fell to my knees on the altar, clutching my chest. It felt like my heart was being ripped apart by claws. Elara, I tried to reach her through our mind link. Nothing. The link was severed. That invisible thread between us, she had cut. It herself. Worse, I felt the power draining from my body at a terrifying speed. My chest, my arms, my back. Every enhancement rune Elara had ever carved into my skin was failing at once. The rune for combat prowess gone. The rune for mental defense gone. The rune for stamina recovery gone. All of it vanished. And only then, in the sudden, shocking absence of her power, did I realize how much I'd come to depend on it. Victor. Footsteps echoed from behind me. I turned to see Serafina walking onto the altar. She wore a slinky black dress, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. Something wrong? You look like you're in agony, she cooed, her voice dripping with scorn. Let me guess. Did your little pet healer finally ditch you? I slowly got to my feet, feeling a weakness I'd never known before. You seem pleased. Of course I'm pleased, she said, not even trying to hide it. I'm finally free of that weak-blooded bitch's presence. Honestly, watching her play the victim all the time was just nauseating. Shut up. Why should I? Serafina's excitement grew. Do you have any idea how many lies I've spun this past month? The critically wounded warriors, the cursed territory, all of it was fake. My fists began to tremble. I just wanted to see how far she would go for you. And the result? She let out a sharp laugh. She actually believed every lie, dutifully carving runes and healing my warriors who were never even hurt. What did you say? Oh, you didn't know? Serafina's eyes glittered with malice. My warriors were never seriously injured. My lands were never cursed. I just wanted to make her understand how little she meant to you. Blood rushed to my head. Every time I made up some excuse, you just sent her my way. Did you know she drew runes until her fingers bled? She pushed her energy to the point of collapse, fainting several times, all to heal my imaginary casualties. My vision started to blur. And you? Serafina stepped right in front of me, her voice as sharp as a blade. You never asked her a single question. You just told her to hurry up, to work faster. Because your temporary mate was waiting for you. My alpha aura flared, spiraling out of control. But you can't blame me entirely, she continued. You said it yourself, remember? That Alara's healing had its limits, that her pack's bloodline was fading, that she'd eventually become a burden. Enough! My roar shook the entire altar. Cracks spiderwebbed across the moonstone steps. What do you want? I growled, my voice low and feral. I want you to understand, Serafina said, taking a step back, her eyes still full of defiance, that she's done with you. And I am the one who is truly fit to be your Luna. The last thread of my sanity snapped. I lunged, my hands closing around her throat. You ruined everything. I slammed her onto the stone steps, my alpha presence crashing down on us like a tidal wave. You ruined her, you ruined me, you ruined it all. Serafina's face turned red as she clawed at my hands. Victor, she choked out. You're insane. Yes, I'm insane. My claws lengthening, my features twisting. I was more beast than man. Because of you. Because of your lies. Because of your poison. Just then, hurried footsteps sounded from the path below. The pack elders had arrived, drawn by the surge of my untamed alpha power. They stormed the altar to find their proud alpha, his eyes burning with red fury, pinning a terrified Serafina to the sacred stone as a destructive aura rolled off him in waves. Alara's POV. Another failure. I stared down at the rune paper in my hand. Just a few crooked lines. No glow, no power. Nothing. This was the 27th time. Scraps of failed attempts littered my rented studio, each one a monument to my own uselessness. The former head rune healer, now unable to draw even the simplest of runes. I threw the rune pen on the table and walked to the window. The city's nightlife was beautiful from up here, neon lights reflecting on the dark water like a shattered rainbow. But the beauty was lost on me. The price for severing the bond was far steeper than I'd imagined. I hadn't just lost my connection to Victor. My gift for runes had been sealed away along with it. Maybe this was just my fate. A weak bloodline was a weak bloodline after all. The next morning, I walked into an antique shop. A help wanted sign was taped to the door. No experience necessary. It was perfect for the shell of a person I'd become. Here for the job? A deep voice came from the back of the shop. I looked up as a man emerged from behind a row of shelves. He looked to be in his early 30s, dressed in a simple black sweater, but he radiated a quiet, immense power. An alpha. And a powerful one at that. Yes, I said, trying to seem as ordinary as possible. My name is Ilara. Riker, he said, extending a hand. I own the place. I shook his hand, but a jolt of energy made me pull back instantly. His presence was so strong it almost overwhelmed me. You're a rune master, he stated. It wasn't a question. I froze. What? The calluses on your hand, Riker said, pointing to my right index finger. Only someone who has held a rune pen for years develops calluses like that. And your scent, it's unique. It carries the mark of an ancient bloodline. I was caught. I am not anymore. Why not? I looked down. My gift is gone. I can't draw them anymore. Riker was silent for a moment. Then he walked to an old wooden cabinet and took out a yellowed piece of parchment. Do you recognize this rune? I glanced at it, and my heart hammered in my chest. It was my pack's sigil. A complex spiral pattern with the ancient symbol for soul healing at its center. This is a Snowfang rune, I whispered, my voice trembling. How do you have this? Because I've been looking for someone who can draw it, Riker said, his eyes intense. For 3 months. Why? Because this is the highest form of soul healing, he said, handing me the parchment. Not some crude combat rune, not some shallow enhancement buff. This is a rune that can actually heal a wounded soul. I took the parchment, feeling the ancient power still clinging to it. This was part of my pack's legacy, one that had been lost for generations. Riker's words were blunt. Your former alpha was an idiot. He wasn't an idiot, I said, defending Victor out of habit. No, Riker scoffed. He had the most precious healer in the world at his disposal, and made her carve combat buffs? That's like using a priceless sword to chop firewood. I wanted to argue, but I had no words. Your gift isn't gone, Riker said, stepping closer. It's just been suppressed by misuse. Like a master's blade that's been used to chop wood for too long. It has simply gone dull. Then how do I get it back? By finding yourself again, he said, his gaze serious and unwavering. Not as someone's subordinate, not as anyone's tool, but as Ilara, the one and only. I looked at him, a flicker of hope I hadn't felt in ages stirring inside me. I can help you, Riker said. My pack needs a real healer. Not someone who draws battle runes, but someone who can mend a wounded soul. What's the catch? There is no catch, he said, shaking his head. Or maybe just one. You must take pride in your own gift, and never use it just to please someone else. I clutched the parchment, feeling the power of my ancestors stirring in my blood. Pay 5 times what your former pack paid you, Riker said without hesitation, along with your own private rune sanctum, the finest materials, and my personal protection. I looked at this stranger, this alpha, and I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. He was nothing like Victor. Victor's gaze had always been possessive, as if I were a prize he had won. I need to think about it. Of course, Riker nodded. But don't take too long. A true gift should never be buried. I turned to leave, but glanced back from the door. Riker was standing in a sliver of sunlight. My territory. Tomorrow. The offer stands, he said, his voice warm but firm. The only condition is that you reclaim your gift. For yourself, and for no one else. Victor's POV. You look like hell. Serafina pushed open my office door, her voice laced with mockery. She was dressed in a vibrant red suit, looking radiant, a stark contrast to me. I looked up, a sharp pain throbbing in my temples. I hadn't slept in 3 days. Without Ilara's runes, my mind was a fortress with its walls torn down. Get out. Is that any way to treat your savior? She walked to my desk and tossed a report onto it. Take a look. Your mighty pack lost another border skirmish. I glanced at the report. 13 casualties, 3 sectors of territory lost. Without Ilara's healing runes, our wounded warriors recovered slowly. Without her enhancement runes, our combat strength was cut in half. Your fault, I said, my fists clenching. My fault? Serafina laughed. Don't you dare shift the blame, Victor. You're the one who threw away your sharpest weapon. She wasn't a weapon. I roared. Wasn't she? She leaned against the edge of my desk, a vicious light in her eyes. Then why did you never ask if she was tired? Why did you hand her over to me every time I made up some pathetic excuse? Shut up. Face it. You saw her as nothing more than a tool to amplify your power. Serafina's voice grew shrill. And now that your favorite tool is gone, you're starting to miss it. I shot to my feet, my alpha's presence pressing down on her. But she didn't flinch. Oh right. I forgot to tell you, she said, pulling a crystal communicator from her bag. My pack has decided to withdraw all support. The funding, the warriors, the border patrols. Everything. What? How do you think your pack got to where it is today? She sneered. It was with 3 years of my pack's backing. Without our money, how would you have expanded your territory? Without our people, how would you have fought off other packs? The room started to spin. And now you have nothing. No healer, no allies, no resources. She walked over to my bookshelf, idly flipping through my files. You're a joke. You've ruined everything. Your greed ruined everything, she shot back, her eyes full of contempt. If you really loved her, you would have completed the bond. If you treasured her, you never would have signed that damn contract with me. I had no answer. You just wanted it all, didn't you? Her healing and my pack support. And what did you end up with? She laughed mockingly. Nothing. I watched her parade around my office, rage burning in my chest. Then my eyes locked on what she was holding. It was a journal of runes Alara had left behind. Her last one. Put it down, I snarled, my voice a low growl. This. Serafina held up the journal, dangling it in front of me. The great masterpiece of your precious healer? Put it down. Let's just see how brilliant she really was. Rip, she tore out the first page, dangling it in front of my face before letting it fall. Stop. Rip. Rip. More pages were torn, fluttering down to the office floor like dead leaves. I lunged for her, but she sidestepped me, continuing to shred the journal. Serafina. Suddenly the office door flew open. My beta Marcus rushed in. He saw the shredded rune pages on the floor, and a fire ignited in his eyes. What are you doing? He roared. What's it to you? Serafina snapped, turning to face him. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a small vial from his coat. Wolfsbane spray. A potent irritant for werewolves. This is for you. He emptied the entire vial in her face. She screamed, clutching her face as she stumbled to the ground. The wolfsbane sent her wolf senses into overdrive, and she began to twitch in agony. I stared at the shredded journal on the floor, at the pieces of paper that held Alara's heart and soul. She had stayed up all night to draw every single one of those pages. She had poured her life force into every single rune. And now, this venomous woman had torn it all to pieces. I stalked toward Serafina, my hand snapping around her wrist. Her face was already swelling from the wolfsbane, her eyes wide with fear. Victor, I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to what? My voice was as cold as ice. I stared down at her, feeling the tremors running through her body as I roared. You dared to touch what was hers? Of course. Here is the complete, revised text with all the suggested modifications integrated for a smoother, more authentic reading experience. Alara's POV. This isn't right. I stared at the rune I'd just finished, shaking my head in frustration. It glowed faintly, but it wasn't what I needed. What's wrong? Riker asked, looking over my shoulder. It's too shallow. I wiped the rune away and started over. A basic healing rune like this only mends flesh and bone. It's useless against a wound to the soul. This was my third day in his territory. Riker's rune sanctuary was even more grand than I'd imagined. The walls, carved from polished white moonstone, seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. Above, a dome of flawless crystal served as the ceiling, flooding the space with pure sunlight by day and drawing down the goddess's moonlight by night. But the best part was, no one was rushing me here. No one demanded I draw a specific rune. Alara, Riker said, sitting across from me. I have something for you. He took a rune pen from an ancient wooden box. I gasped. The pen was pure silver white, covered in intricate, ancient runes. A faint, holy light glowed from its tip. But more than that, I could feel the life force flowing through it. A branch from the world tree. I breathed, my hand trembling as I took it. It's a legend. An artifact from the dawn of time. It is, Riker nodded. And only someone of a pure healing bloodline can wield it. It took me 5 years to find it. I've been keeping it safe, waiting for the one it was meant for. I held the pen, feeling it resonate with my blood. No rune pen had ever felt so perfectly in sync with my power. Why give it to me? Because you deserve it. His gaze was steady and serious. And I need your help. Riker stood and unbuttoned his shirt. When he turned his back to me, I saw the horrifying scar. It was a massive tear in his flesh, running from his left shoulder to his right hip, a sickly blackish purple. Worse, I could feel the waves of pain and despair radiating from it. Silverblade poison, he said, his voice low. From an assassination attempt 3 years ago. I survived, but my soul was torn. The pain is unbearable on a full moon. A normal healing rune won't work on a wound like this. I know. Riker looked back at me. But your family's runes can. Soul healing. It's a lost art, known only to the Snowfang bloodline. I hesitated. Soul healing requires the healer and the patient to form a deep spiritual link. It's more intimate and more dangerous than a normal bond. Are you sure about this? I'll see your deepest memories. I'll feel your most hidden emotions. I trust you, he said without a moment's hesitation. I took a deep breath and raised the world tree pen. I began to draw in the air above his scar, weaving the healing pattern from pure energy. The pen glowed with a warm light. Golden healing energy enveloped Riker's back, seeping deep into his soul. At the same time, our spirits began to merge, with no barriers, no defenses. It wasn't a violation or an invasion. It was a complete and total sharing. I saw flashes of his life, a lonely childhood, the sting of his uncle's betrayal, the crushing weight of leading a pack alone. And in return he felt mine. The helplessness at my father's sickbed, Victor's chilling indifference, the ache of being used like a tool. The rune's light grew brighter, and the black scar on Riker's back began to fade. When the light vanished, his back was smooth, the skin unblemished. 3 years of agony gone. I lowered the pen, feeling the new bond between us. This wasn't a chain forged by fate. It was a choice made by 2 souls. Alara. Riker turned around, his eyes soft. Before I could speak, the doors to the sanctuary burst open. There you are. Victor stood in the doorway, flanked by several Black Moon warriors. He looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. But they burned with a crazed light. How did you get in here? Riker demanded, pulling his shirt on and stepping in front of me. I have my ways, Victor growled, his eyes locked on me. Alara, come back with me. The Black Moon Pack needs you. Get out, I said coldly. This is High Tide Pack territory. You belong to me. Victor took a step forward, his alpha's command washing over me. You are my fated mate. I was, I said, rising to my feet without flinching. But I severed the bond. Victor's eyes darted between Riker and me, saw the obvious connection, and the madness in them flared. Is it him? He pointed a shaking finger at Riker. Did this mutt steal you from me? I am not a possession. I stepped forward, golden healing energy flickering around me. And you don't get to decide who I choose. I know the bond is broken, Victor said, his voice raspy. I felt it tear. He staggered into the sanctuary, looking even more worn down than he had 3 months ago. Then what are you doing here? I asked coldly. I'm begging you to come back, he said, his voice thick with desperation. Not because you're my fated mate, not because of the bond. Because I need you. Oh, you need me now? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Where was this feeling when you were using me? When you were humiliating me? I was wrong, Victor practically shouted. Serafina confessed. The injured warriors, the curse on our lands, it was all a lie she made up. I know, I said calmly. So what? What? He froze. I said I know. I watched the shock spread across his face. I knew it was fake from the very beginning. Victor looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Then why did you? Because I loved you, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. Because I thought if I was obedient enough, useful enough, you would finally value me. Ilara, but I was wrong, I continued. You never wanted a mate. You wanted a tool. A tool who could give you runes and never question your decisions. The color drained from Victor's face. The Black Moon Pack is bleeding, he said, his voice cracking. Without your runes, we've lost 3 territory skirmishes. My warriors have lost heart. The elders are already whispering that I should step down. And Serafina is dead. His voice trembled. After her family withdrew their support, she tried to flee back to the northern territories. She was torn apart by rogues on the way. I felt nothing. I'm about to lose everything. Victor reached a hand toward me. But I can start over. We can start over. I'll give you real respect, real love. It's too late. I walked to Riker's side and stopped in front of him. Victor, look closely. I took Riker's hand. This is my choice. Not fate, not a political alliance. It's because he truly respects me. A golden light bloomed from our joined hands. Before the goddess and by the blood of Snowfang, I, Ilara, choose Riker, Alpha of the High Tide Pack, as my mate. And I, Riker, choose you. To cherish, to protect, and to stand with you now and always. A new mate's mark formed on our palms, more beautiful than any mark forged by fate. No, Victor collapsed to the floor. I can change, I can learn to love you. You don't get to learn to love me now, Victor. I said, my gaze holding no hatred, only a calm finality. Not when I've already found someone who doesn't have to try. Riker's arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me into his embrace. It wasn't possessive, only protective and cherished. Leave, Victor. Riker's voice was cold as ice. You vais l'hôtel. For good. Victor struggled to his feet, his eyes falling on our new marks. The last flicker of hope in them died. I'll have nothing left, he muttered. That was your choice, I said calmly. Just as this is mine. 6 months later. I stood in the great hall of the High Tide Pack, wearing a traditional bonding gown, waiting for the official ceremony to begin. Representatives from all over the werewolf world had come to witness the union of the legendary healer. Nervous? Riker asked, taking my hand. No. I looked at him, my eyes filled with certainty. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Just before the ceremony, Marcus approached us. There's news, he said quietly. Victor was found in a tavern in the northern wastes last night. Drunk. He'd used a dagger to carve off all the old pack marks on his arm. I was silent for a moment. Did he say anything? He raised his glass to an empty room and said, she chose the better man. We both got what we deserved. I nodded, then let the news go. The moon priestess began the blessing, and golden light showered down on us. Riker looked at me, his eyes full of love and promise. From this day forward, I said, squeezing his hand, we write our own story. Under the watch of the moon goddess, I had finally found where I truly belonged. Not by fate's design, but by my own choice.